Hello, I am here today with a different kind of video. I typically bring out card making videos, paper crafting, and I assume I'm gonna attract a new audience because this video is all about reading and journaling. So I'm creating a reading journal using this Archer and Olive. I think this is a B5 or a B6 journal. I'll have it linked below, but I love the embroidery and I thought it would be fun to kind of combine my paper crafting skills with journaling because I'll be honest, I'm a little bit nervous because there is a distinct style when it comes to reading journals, especially with paper layering, ephemera, collaging, and scrapbooking. There's also a lot of stickers. So I kind of created my own stickers using my own die sets. So if you're new to my channel, I did design all of these myself. I illustrated them, and I thought they would be perfect to create stickers to embellish my journal. I also used a stamp set here. I used the butterflies, and I don't want to spend too much time on my supplies because I do like when creators just kind of dive right in and use what they have. But I made my life a little bit easier by creating these off camera, all these little stickers. Right now they're just silver metal, but if you have a die cut machine, you can cut all these out and create lifelong stickers that you can use over and over again. So I chose my die sets that are more book related to decorate the setup of my journal. And then when I start getting into my monthly spreads, I will do more themed months. But let's go ahead and get right in. I don't want to waste any time. So yeah, I'm going to switch over to voiceover. All right, so I'm going to dive right in to the first spread here. On the left side, there's some pretty foiling, so I'm not going to add anything to that. On the right side, this is the This Journal Belongs To page, and I'm keeping it pretty simple. I'm going to add a label and a few butterflies from the Life is a Story stamp set that I showed at the beginning of the video. If you are completely new to my channel, everything that I'm using are my own products, and I will have them linked down below to my website if you are interested. You will need a die cut machine to recreate a lot of these stickers, quote-unquote stickers, that I am using to decorate my journal. I also left a lot of my mistakes in, hence why this video is so long. So please get a snack or a drink while you watch this. I don't think I've ever posted a video this long before, but I wanted to leave as much in because I'm very proud of how this turned out. It took several weeks for me to create this, mainly because I created it when I had spare time. Even though I'm using my own products and I can promote my own products in this video, I still had other obligations for my job that I had to do before this. So this journal took several weeks for me to create, and I did a lot of overthinking because I am not a journalist. I am a paper crafter, and while I am kind of incorporating my card making skills into this journal, I still struggled quite a bit. So you can see I'm trying to incorporate paper layering, which is very popular in the reading journal community. And I don't know, I wanted my journal to look similar to other people's, and eventually I just stopped caring. Like, it was so difficult for me to create something that I liked that I eventually just went to my card making style, and as I went, I got a little bit more confident. I was also struggling a lot with the size of this journal. So I create 5x7 cards, and this journal is about 6.5 by 8.5 inches, maybe a little bit bigger than that. So I had to also get used to the size. But you saw there, I did a lot of scrap layering, trying to figure out if I liked it, and I just didn't. I'm not much of a paper layering collage person. So this is where I am realizing, you know, I don't have to do what everyone else does. I'm just going to stay true to what I think looks best. So I'm just going to go with these 3 butterflies and this label. And I did cut out my name to add inside the label. And I do like my handwriting, but I am left-handed, and that means if I'm using a pen, sometimes my hand will smear the ink. And early on, while I was creating this journal, I was just deathly afraid of smearing my spreads, which is kind of silly because this is handmade. It does not have to be perfect, but I avoid using my own handwriting for quite a bit until I get halfway through this video. So pretty much all of these spreads have these label headers, which I actually really like how they turned out. But definitely what took me the longest was die cutting every single letter for my headers. And what's nice though is I'm using dies, so I can cut as many letters as I want. I don't have to use like an alphabet sticker sheet that will eventually run out of letters. These will last for as long as I want to die cut them. So it did take quite a bit of time, but I think the headers and these little labels are my favorite part of the journal. Here I am again trying to add paper layering. In the end, I get rid of it all and I move on to the next spread. But here is the stamp set that I used. This is Life is a Story. I used the stamp and the coordinating dies. I did everything beforehand so that I could try to reduce my filming time, but this is a super long video, so it still took a very long time. All right, the next page is going to be my official title. A lot of people skip this page because the left side isn't technically something you can really use, but I thought I'll use the right side as my 2025 book journal title page. And my focal point is this beautiful open book design. I do have videos on most of the dies that I'm using if you would like to see how I paper piece them. But for the sake of time, I did do everything off camera. I am going to do a lot of paper layering. Again, that's kind of my comfort zone. I'm not doing collaging, but I am incorporating paper because I also struggled with using the actual grid paper to help me create grids, to write in a straight line. I do a lot of avoiding at the beginning of this and do what I'm comfortable with. And then as I go, I start trying the reading journal techniques that I've seen on YouTube. So I added a piece of craft paper at the top and then some pattern paper at the bottom. The pattern paper I used are all scraps from my stash. A lot of it is Scrappy Tales paper, but some of it I think is Spellbinders paper. I want to use another label. I go with the white one. And again, this label is from the Life is a Story stamp set that I just showed. There's 2 different labels in that stamp set, and this is the larger one. I will use both sizes throughout this journal. And I'm going around the edges with a brown Distress Blender tool just to tone down the whiteness. I noticed a lot of reading journalists kind of go for a vintage style, and I did do that here and there, but I also included a lot of bright colors in my spreads, so I have a nice mix of both. The stamp set has these little leaves that I'm going to tuck behind the label, and the open book die includes those butterflies. I'm also going to add some gold little sparkles or stars around the butterflies. Those are also included in the open book die set. I'm going to go around the edges of my leaves again with the brown blender brush, just using whatever ink was already on the brush to distress the edges. And then I'll go ahead and glue everything down. So I'm using art glitter glue to attach most everything to my journal. I also use ATG tape quite a bit. And if I were to make this on a card, I would do a lot of popping up. I would add multiple layers to add dimension, but for this journal, I am keeping everything one layer and as flat as possible. I'm not using heavy cardstock for anything because the journal will eventually get bulky, but I don't want it to be too chunky because obviously I'm going to keep adding to this, so I want my spreads as flat as possible. So the 2025, those numbers came in the graduation bookmark die set. And then all of my letter dies came from the new pet collar set and the teacher bookmark die set. And again, I will have everything I used linked down below. I know a lot of journalists like to use stamps, so that's why I use the Life as a Story stamp set a lot throughout this journal. But I thought that this was a nice title page to start off the rest of the spreads. The only other tool I really used is this corner rounder. I really like this tool. I think I got it on Amazon. And the journal pages, you can see, are rounded. So that corner rounder helped me match up the corners on the pages with whatever cardstock I'm using for my layering. All right, so that finishes off the title page. I'm just going to go in and add some more glue on the sides to make sure everything is tacked down, and then we will move on. And my next spread is going to be my bookshelfie. I'm still very much straying away from actual journal techniques, still in my comfort zone for kind of paper piecing and building scenes with my dies. So I'm going to start by covering the pages with this pattern paper. Again, I'm just kind of easing into this project, still getting used to the size of it, still kind of trying to let go of my perfectionism a little bit because I do want to incorporate my handwriting later on. But for now, I'm still sticking to my paper craft style. But I am going to go ahead and tape down these papers. This was just a random pattern paper I had in my stash, and I thought it looked kind of like wallpaper. So I want to create a living room scene. And my actual bookshelf on this layout will be my bookshelfie, and I'm going to organize the books on it based on genre. So you'll see what I'm referring to as we kind of go along here, but I'm gonna add some glue right near the spine just to make sure everything is tacked down well. I'll even close the journal to get everything stuck down. It's a little bit difficult early on in the spreads because there's much more weight on the right side versus the left, but it ended up being okay. On the bottom, I'm kind of creating my flooring with this cream textured pattern paper. And I'm using 6x6 paper here, so I'm using scraps to go all the way across. You won't see the seams where those two papers meet. I will add die cuts over it, so it's not a huge deal. And then here is my bookshelf. So this is my classic bookshelf die set. I'm also going to add this plant from the plant ladder set. And I'm just incorporating a bunch of dies that would work to build a living room scene. Now that bookshelf, you can see all of my books are white. By the way, that's my cat Maverick. And the idea is that I'm going to fill in the books on the shelf with different colors that match the genre that I read. But I did go ahead and decorate everything else on the bookshelf, like the frames. There's a little basket, there's some plants. Obviously, I added the gold accents on the drawers and on the decorative parts of the shelf. So by the time this is all full of colorful books, that bookshelf is going to be really pretty. And you'll see that I'm going to fill out the first couple books on this shelf because, you know, we're already 3 months into the year, or I guess 4 months at this point. So I think I added up until my March reads onto this shelf. So there's the trifold window that's going to go on the top right, and I'm actually going to cut a window through the journal so that you can see onto the next spread. So I'm using a pencil to outline that, and then I'll take my scissors and just cut along that pencil line. I noticed some journalists create Dutch doors and really cool see-through elements that I definitely want to do more of in this journal. And this was kind of the first try at it, and I really like how it turned out. So I cut that out, and then my window is going to go on top. Below, I have a couch and a chair. Both of those come in the same die set. I kind of wish I would have done the couch in this yellow color that the chair is in, and then made the couch maybe a brown color. Just because the couch kind of blends in with the flooring a little bit, but I think it's still okay. On the chair, I added a little kitty, and on the couch, there is a corgi. I'll also add a cat to the window. All right, so in order to fill the books on my shelf, I needed an area to hold all of my different colored books. So I'm creating a very simple coin envelope using a 6x6 pattern paper. And I'll link to the video where I learned how to make this. I kind of left part of the footage in, but definitely refer to that video for the exact measurements. These are very easy to create yourself, and I can also maybe create it as a die one day if you guys are interested. But I really like that this particular tutorial I found uses a 6x6 pattern paper, and I am using a double-sided paper so that it's pretty on the outside and the inside. I'm going to take a circle die to cut a notch at the top of my envelope. So I just used the bottom part of that circle die to cut that out, and then I can just go ahead and tape this closed. So that's how it's going to look. Very simple. It only took about 5 minutes to create this pocket. I'm going to use double-sided tape on these tabs here, and you can either wrap these tabs around or keep them hidden on the inside. I am going to round this top flap so that people, or I guess that I will know to open this up. I'm also going to change the flap to a different pattern so it's more noticeable later. All right, and then I'm just going to swing the right side on top of the left. And here's where I want a different paper for the top. So this was a scrap that I cut off. I'm just going to reattach it at the top and then round it again with my corner rounder. And you can use a magnet to keep that closed. I'm just going to use some washi tape. And you can see I added some butterflies to it, and then I have the little word die that says books, and that's where I'm going to store all of the books that will go on my shelf. And I cut them all from different colored papers to match the genre that I read. I'm going to add this pink butterfly to the center of the flap. And then on the left side, I'm going to create my header, and this is going to say bookshelfy on it. I'm going to go around the edges again with brown ink. And then I'm going to create my key so that whoever looks into this journal will know what genre each color belongs to. I'm going to add a book to the windowsill and a little coffee cup there. I love all the details. Here are all the different colored books that I have. I'm going to trim them down to 2 or 3 books and kind of stack them in this open space here. And then I have all of my genres. And again, I created these with letter dies. I cut them from gold and glued them on some craft cardstock and cut them into little rectangle labels. And I'm going to move things around just so that the spacing makes a bit of sense here. And I was only able to fit, I think, 6 or 7 genres, but I really only read these genres anyway. Nonfiction I'm going to combine with memoir, because I do read memoirs pretty often. So you can see the color next to whatever genre, that will be the color that I add to my shelf. And I haven't decided yet if I want to number the books or not. I probably will, but obviously I'm going to start on the top left and work my way to the bottom right. Here you can see I'm kind of rearranging the colors. My most read genres are fantasy, romance, and thriller, so I made sure to pick 3 colors that I really like for those 3. And then I could go ahead and glue everything down. So this is probably my favorite spread in the journal. It definitely took the longest, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. I love the colors and that blue wallpaper in the background. I think cutting the window to show the white, eventually it'll be a different color, but that kind of broke up the busy pattern as well. And then all those books that have the different colors on them will go into that envelope so that when I go to fill out my bookshelf, I can reach in and grab the color that I need for each book. So I thought that was a fun way to showcase my bookshelfy spread. Other people will actually put the actual book spines on their shelf, or they'll color in the books to look like the book spine. Some people will organize it by rating, and I just chose to do genre because I think that's an interesting stat to look over at the end of the year and see which genres I tend to read more of. But you can see I'm already filling out my first couple books of the year. So I have a fantasy, my second book of the year was a romance, and then I have another fantasy. So it's really easy for me to just cut these out and glue them right onto the bookshelf. And I can't wait to see all the colors at the end of the year. And again, I think I'm going to go in and write a tiny number on the center of each of these book spines. All right, then I had another romance, and now I have a thriller. Like I said, those are my 3 most read genres. So I anticipate that most of this bookshelf will be those 3 colors. But I did, since filming this, I did read a nonfiction, and that's it. The rest have been fantasy and romance. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and put the rest of these books into the envelope. I will say this envelope is quite bulky, so once I remove all those books at the end of the year, hopefully my journal won't be quite as chunky. But I am going to go ahead and write out bookshelfy with my letter dies and then tape that down. And then this finishes off my first spread, and I'm so happy with this. This spread really kind of gave me the confidence to keep going and to try to use techniques that I've learned from other reading journal booktubers. So on this other side, I'm going to add another window, and I wanted this dark pink magenta color to peek through the other side, so I just cut that from an arched die in my stash, and that will go on the right side. I'm going to add another book and another cat to the window. I'll also add a coffee mug on top of the book, and then on top of this panel I'm going to add some more butterflies. You can see I have my container of die cuts and stamped images. So I spent pretty much like 3 whole days prepping all of my stamps and die cuts, and then it took another 4 or 5 days to complete this journal. But again, I was working on it when I actually had time. So it took several weeks with a couple hours each day to finish this up. All right, so there's my other window. I glued it backwards so that it's going to line up with the window on the front. I'm going to go ahead and glue this pattern paper arch. You can see I drew out little boxes. So this was my first attempt at trying to do freehand drawing, and it did not go well. I overthought it. I messed it up. I messed up a tiny section that I don't think anyone but me would have noticed. So I should have kept going, but instead I changed it up. But here I'm adding my little butterflies. I thought those would be cute, kind of peeking through the window. So I'm constantly flipping the page to make sure that you see those butterflies. All right. This is going to be my new release spread. So these letter dies come from the pet collar set. So these letters are a little bit smaller than the ones I have been using, and this label is the smaller one. And now I'm going to create 12 boxes for each month of the year. And they're going to vary in size. You saw that I sketched out the boxes, and originally I was going to draw them in with a fine liner, but my lines weren't straight. I thought it was ugly. So now I'm using pattern paper again to create my own boxes. Again, I probably did not need to do this. I don't think anyone but me would have noticed that the lines weren't completely straight. But I do like how these boxes turned out, and I did use different pattern papers and colors to add interest to the spread. Now I'm finally using my handwriting. I am making sure to not smear anything as I'm writing, but I'm basically just writing out all of the new books that are coming out this year that I'm interested in into each of the monthly boxes. January actually had quite a bit of new releases, so I'm trying to squeeze in as many as I can. And then I think I was able to fill my boxes up until September. And here's those ones that I drew in. You can see that they're not perfect, but they definitely would have been fine. And that was just me kind of overthinking, but I'm gonna go ahead and glue my monthly boxes on top. And I do really like how they turned out. It adds some nice color when you can add paper. And I will say it definitely gives off more of a scrapbooky vibe versus a journal, but the more I continue, the more I utilize the journal and get comfortable with it. So I think actually incorporating my handwriting gave me a lot of confidence going to the next spread. But yeah, I think I couldn't really find any new releases past September. They usually get announced halfway through the year. So I will fill out November, December, and October once I know what books are coming out. So feel free to pause the video if you're interested to see what books I'm interested in. And if you have any suggestions on some book recommendations, please let me know. Like I said, I only read 2 or 3 books a month. So I read when I can. All right, my next spread will be my ratings. And this, I think, is actually my favorite spread. So I'm filling out my header using some gold letters this time and some tweezers. That was really helpful creating these. Again, I have seen other people do different variations of this, but I thought it would be fun to color butterflies based on my ratings. So a little bit like the book genres where I separated it by color, I'm going to do the same thing with my ratings and color each of my butterflies a different color to represent a specific rating. So here are all the colors I used. If I were to recreate this spread, I probably would have added a green color, just one more color family, because some of the butterflies look a little bit similar. But I think if you look closely, you'll know which butterfly goes with which rating. This one's going to be all pink, and then the next one is going to be more orangey, like a monarch. And I know some people might be watching this video and thinking that it's quite repetitious to constantly keep referring to the same book over and over again in different parts of the journal. But I think that's why people really like journaling, because there's a sense of accomplishment when you color something in or fill something out on a log. So I personally don't mind having spreads that kind of repeat themselves. I think there's just joy in filling something out and seeing it come to life when it's all said and done. So here's my next butterfly. It looks a little bit similar to that orange one, but I tried to add more yellow. So that's where where I was saying that some of these butterflies look a bit similar. That's why I'm going back in with this one and adding more orange to it. But I did want to create lifelike butterflies, so I went with colors that you see quite a lot in butterflies. This one's going to be a pink and orange one. And again, all the butterfly images come from that Life is a Story stamp. This next one, I think I'm going to do purple, blue and purple probably, or just all blue. And I tend to rate books quite high. And at the time when I was creating these butterflies, I went from 1.5 all the way up to 5 because I've never rated a book less than 1.5 before. But funny enough, after I finished this spread, I finished a book that I gave 1 star, which has never happened before. So I ended up coloring it as the 1.5 rating. But I tend to rate generously. I am a serial 5-star reader. If I like the book, I'm more likely going to give it a 4 or 5 stars. So it was pretty surprising that I was able to color in one of the butterflies I thought I would never have to color in. So I did a blue and purple one, and now I'm doing a pink and blue butterfly. And this one, I think I'm going to do yellow and purple. And I can't wait to see this spread completely filled out. I am worried that most of the butterflies are going to be the same 2 colors because, like I said, I do tend to rate pretty high when I'm reading. But so far, I have a good mix of colors based on what I filled out already. But this is how I'm going to lay out the left side. This will be my key, where I will show which butterfly represents which rating. At the bottom here, I'm going to add some butterfly pattern paper from my stash. I think this is Heartfelt Creations. I'll also add the same paper at the top. And then I'll rearrange my grid to space these apart. Now, you saw that I cut those sprigs off the butterflies, and I kept all of those. I'm going to add them behind my headers as I keep going along this journal. So you can see I added those little swirls behind the ratings label. I'm going to go ahead and glue all of these down now. And let me know if you would like to see a continuation of this journal. I honestly think all I'm going to do is add my book reviews after these setup spreads. So I might just fill those out on my own and then at the end of the year do a final flip through. I don't think I'm going to do monthly setups just because it's already April. And again, I just don't read that many books to really make it worthwhile. But I definitely want to include my actual book reviews of every book that I read. And then at the end, I'm going to do like my yearly stats. So maybe I will do a follow-up video towards the end of the year. All right, now I'm going to pencil in, or I guess go over my penciled ratings. Again, I was so scared that I wasn't going to like my handwriting, so I wrote it out first in pencil, and now I'm going over it with my fine liner. But here you can see every butterfly has its own rating. And I just anticipated that I would never have to color the blue and purple butterfly because I've never read a book that was less than 1.5 stars. But I did in fact make one. All right, in the bottom, I'm going to do in butterflies so that it says ratings in butterflies. And I thought this was really fun. I love how this turned out. I think it is my favorite spread other than the living room one that I just did. But I really think this is going to be awesome when everything is colored. So on the right side will be all of my white stamped out butterflies that I will color in throughout the year. I'm going to add a die cut butterfly there at the top. And then I'm going to give them some gold body centers. All right, now I'm going to pull out all of my stamped butterflies. These are from that same stamp set. I like that there's different sizes, so I can kind of puzzle them all together. I left some of this footage in so you can get an idea of how I did this. But based on me reading 2 to 3 books a month, I believe there's 30 butterflies. So my goal this year is to read 30. I know I'll probably read at least 24 because so far I've read 2 books a month. So I think 30 is very achievable. And really 30 was all I could fit. So it ended up working out pretty well. All right, I found a layout that I like, so now I'm going to go ahead and glue everything down. Again, I'm not going to show you all the gluing because I'm sure you guys get the point there. And now I'm just gluing my last couple butterflies there at the bottom. And I can go ahead and fill out the first 3 or 4 butterflies. So my first read of the year was Fourth Wing, and I gave that 5 stars. So I'm going to have a pink and orange butterfly. Great start to the year. All right, and then the second book I read, I think, is It Starts With Us. I gave that 3 stars. My third book was Iron Flame, which was another 5 star. I am reading Onyx Storm. My boyfriend and I are reading it together, so it's taking a while because we obviously both have to read it when we both have time and want to read it together, so I'm hoping by the end of this month I will finish Onyx Storm. All right, my next book I believe was Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. I gave that 4 stars, and then here is my 1-star book that I read. It's Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. I know a lot of people love this book, and I read it because I know they're making a movie this year, but I could not follow along. I was very confused most of the time I was reading it. I wanted to DNF it, but I'm someone that cannot DNF a book. I don't know why. I just feel like if I've already invested half the time into the book, I might as well finish it, but I wish I would have DNF'd it. I also went ahead and numbered each of the butterflies. I will probably also do that for the bookshelf, just so that I know which rating goes to which book I read. So when I go to my reading log, which you'll see on one of my next couple spreads, I'll know that book 1 was 4th wing, etc. All right, so I am trying my hand again at paper layering. This is definitely something I see a lot in not only reading journal videos, but also bullet journal. You saw I struggled at the beginning trying to do paper layering, but this time I'm using literal scraps. I'm not ripping anything this time. I kind of like the clean, straight lines on these. And these flowers are a mix of the Love You Mom florals and the retro blooms. And I'm just creating a cluster on the bottom left, and I'll have another one on the top right. I'm happy with that, so I took everything apart, and now I'm going to glue everything down. I'll round the corner of that pattern paper. I created the header that says reading log. I'm actually going to switch that out. I realized that I needed more room than I have provided on this spread for my reading log, so I'm going to swap that out for a different header later on. So I'll trim off the overhanging flower petals, and then I'm going to create another cluster on the top right. By the way, prior to this journal, I have been logging all of my book reviews on a digital reading journal that I'd be happy to share in another video, because I'm quite proud of that digital journal as well. And I theme a lot of the decorations based on the book, which I can't really do in a physical journal unless I print a bunch of photos for each book that I read. So I'd be happy to share that. And I'm going to actually continue with my digital journal too. So maybe at the end of the year, I'll share the physical and the digital. You can see I swapped out the bottom header for books read, and this will be where I place my book covers. So I cut all of my book covers from my Selfie Canon printer. Here are those little sprigs that I cut off the butterflies earlier. I'm going to tuck them underneath the flowers, and I really like that. So go ahead and glue all of my scraps of paper, and I thought that this was a nice in-between. I finally did a little bit of collaging, but I still kept it to my style by not ripping anything. I kept everything very clean cut. And based on the size of my book covers, I believe they're about 1 inch by 1.5 inches. I will need 2 spreads if I'm going to fill out 30 books for the year. So the spread after this one will be very similar, using the same flowers. I don't think I use any pattern paper scraps. I think instead I use leaves. So you'll see that. But here I have my book covers cut out, again from my selfie printer. And I like that you can create 8 of them at once. Or you can print 4 larger ones on one page. And I plan to use those for my book review pages. So these are the books I have already read this year. I added 1/2 inch double-sided tape behind them. They are printed on photo paper, so they're glossy. I wanted to use strong tape for them. I am organizing them in the order that I read them. And here I'm debating if I want to squeeze 4 of them on a row or do 3. I think I end up squeezing 4 of them on a row just because I ultimately want to fit as many books as I can. But I really like how this turned out with the bright flowers and the bright book covers. I think this will be really cool once I start to add more books in here. I did just finish reading Serpent in the Wings of Night, and I gave that 4 stars. I really liked that. And then my next read will be to finish Onyx Storm, and then I think I'm going to read Better Than the Movies because I've already committed to it on this spread. And that's a YA romance. Below these book covers, I'm going to add my rating. So I'm using a Tombow yellow marker for that. I'm just freehand drawing my stars. Some people have star stamps that they color in. You can do that if you want. So now we'll move on. And here I'm trying to calculate how many books I can fit. And I realize I'll need another double spread if I want to try to hit my goal of 30 books. So this is going to be very similar. I'm just going to do the opposite corners this time. And I'm not going to use pattern paper scraps. I'm going to use these leaves. I have a lot of these small flowers that I'm going to add. And with these flowers, you can layer more than one flower together, but again, I'm trying to keep mine as flat as possible, so most of these flowers just have one layer and then they have some sort of flower center. Alright, and that will just be a continuation page of this one, so I'll just keep adding book covers to this. And now I'm going to move on to my reading log and my purchase log. So again, I'm trying my hand out at hand drawing a grid, and this one actually turned out decently well. Not perfect, but good enough for me. And then I did something that ruined it, but I'll show you when that comes. For now, I want to create a reading log that will include the title, author, the date I started the book, and the date that I ended the book. I also wanted to include how many pages were in the book, but I didn't really have space for that, so I excluded that. And I'm going to do basically the same thing on the purchase log. I do author, title, the date I purchased, and where I purchased it from. I think it's nice to know where I got it because I do try to support my local bookstore as much as I can. You can also add the format of how you read the book, if it's an audio, an ebook, or a physical book. So everyone has a different reading log. All right, again, I'm using some scraps of paper to go along the top. Here I'm going to add the line across that will be the information that I add. And I was so proud that I was able to create a successful grid, but I proceeded to ruin it by adding some Tombow marker stripes. I thought I would want like light pink stripes in between all of the books that I plan to add, but I did not have a steady hand when I went to do that, and it just looked really bad. So you'll see it. And I ended up just recreating these grids on some extra grid paper that I took from the back of the notebook, because I know I'm most likely not going to finish this journal anyway, so I might as well use some of the papers in the back. And then I will glue the new graphs on top of these ones that I messed up. On the right side, I'm kind of offsetting the two papers that I chose, and I know for sure these two are from the Butterfly Kisses paper pad by Scrappy Tales. I have purchase log and reading log. And each side has about 30 potential books that I can add. I'm most likely going to purchase and read more than 30. So if I have to, I might have to kind of build a pull down that some other booktubers do. But we'll see. I might hit exactly 30 on each page. I did purchase a lot of books for my birthday, but I'm not including those because I think I bought like 10 books. So I'm officially starting the purchase log after my birthday, just so that I can save space. But here you can see my stripes look really bad, and I thought maybe if I go and offset with some yellow stripes that would help, but that made it look worse. So I was really disappointed that it turned out this way. I have seen other reading journalists do the stripes with Tombow markers, and it looks really good, but I think you have to have a steady hand for it, and I just did not. So I'm going to cover it up. Like I said, I just recreated the grid on some more grid paper, and I'm going to add a strip of craft, and that will be my category headers. So I'm going to extend my lines up into the craft. But I was very happy that I was able to utilize for the first time the actual grid on the paper in the journal. I definitely think it would have been pretty with those pink stripes, but I wasn't going to risk ruining it again, so I just left it as is. So my goal is to have my reading log be longer than my purchase log, but I do have a problem of buying a lot of books. It's like two separate hobbies for me. But yeah, that's kind of the purpose of having these side by side, is to assess at the end of the year if I'm buying too much, which I know I am, but this will just further prove that. All right, I decided to add a couple more butterflies at the top to fill in the space. And then this spread is done. Very simple, but I do like that craft header. And then I think the next spread, okay, will be my challenge spreads. So this on the left, these are all books from my Books and Coffee die set, including that pink book at the bottom there. I left them all this cream color because this will be my A to Z challenge. So every book will represent a letter in the alphabet. And then I can fill them out based on the books that I read. Their titles will correspond with a letter from the alphabet. So for Fourth Wing, that will be the letter F. Iron Flame will be the letter I. And the goal is to try to read a book from A to Z. But obviously, I probably won't do that. But it'll be fun to see how many I'll be able to fill out. And I left them cream so that I can recut them from different colored cardstock that matches the book. So for Fourth Wing, I'm going to do a gold book. And so that will add some more color to this spread, and it'll also ensure that the actual pages on this image will remain cream, kind of like that pink book in the corner. You can see that the pages are cream, but everything else is a different color. So I did cut the book covers from the books I've already read. And I decided for my challenge that I am excluding the words A and the at the beginning of the titles. So for instance, The Woman in Cabin 10 technically starts with a T because the title starts with the, but there's so many titles that start with the, so I'm excluding A and the. Some people include it. It's kind of just up to your interpretation of it. So for W, I am going to put Woman in Cabin 10. Because I think otherwise W might be a hard letter to find anyway. So I'm taking some civil liberties on that. And then I have my letters that I cut from gold. I'm going to start the beginning of the book with the actual letter in the alphabet, and then I'll fill out the rest of the title with my pen. So there's Fourth Wing. And here I realized that I have two I's. It starts with Us and Iron Flame. Obviously, I only need one of them. So as I go in to fill this out, I realize I have two I's. So I'm just going to take off that blue cover and I'll replace it with whatever book starts with H. So now I have the correct alphabet. Now I'm going to do Iron Flame. Down here will be Woman in Cabin 10. And then my Y will be Yours Truly. And again, I'm picking the colors of the book covers based on the colors that are in the actual book. And then down here, I'm going to write A to Z challenge. And then on the right side, I'm going to do my book bingo. Again, using some tweezers to help line up these letters. As I mentioned, creating these custom headers definitely took the longest amount of time, but I'm really happy with how they turned out. All right, here is my bingo grid. And I just used scraps of the same pattern papers I've been using for the whole journal so far. And I'm going to go ahead and just glue them on. And the way I will mark if I successfully completed a prompt on my bingo board is I will use a tiny white flower as a marker. And then hopefully by the end of the year, I'll have multiple bingos. I was already able to fill out 3 of these tiles. I did cut out a little bit of this because it's just me gluing tiles down. And here is my completed grid that will just be glued over there onto the right side. And then I'm going to create a header on the top right this time. I'm using lightweight cardstock for pretty much everything. Just to limit the amount of bulk. On this left side, I'm going to add another image from the Books and Coffee set. And the flowers that are on that image are the flowers that I will use as my markers on my bingo board. Now to create the prompts on my board, I'm going to handwrite them all on craft cardstock and then fussy cut around them. So here's that word book again. It's the same book title I used on that envelope on my bookshelfy spread. And then below that I will handwrite the word bingo. Here is my cat Maverick again. I'm going to trim off the side, round the corners. And then here are all of my prompts that I hand wrote. You can go ahead and read them all. I did try to do some obvious ones that I can easily fill out, but there are some harder ones in there, like having to read a classic, animal on the cover, let's see, a 600+ page book. So I did incorporate some that might be more difficult for me to complete. But that will finish off my challenge spread. So we're going to move on. And this will be my book bracket. So some people don't include this spread because it's not a good indication of what your favorite books of each month might be. You might have 2 5-star books in January and, you know, maybe in June all of your books are 3 stars. But it does give you an accurate depiction of your absolute favorite book of the year. So as someone who already tends to rate books pretty high anyway, I do like having the book bracket. I like seeing the books compete against each other. And for me, I'm really only looking for my absolute favorite book of the year anyway. So I decided to include this spread. At the end of the year, I also plan to do like a 5-star read showcase so that if there is a book that didn't land on the bracket that I want to talk more about or highlight, they will be represented on another layout later at the end of the year, I'm thinking. But here I am using more scraps of paper to create this bracket. The yellow papers will represent every single month of the year. I will place my favorite book of each month into the yellow section, and then January and February will compete, and I will find a winner between those 2 months that will go onto the green tile, and then the 2 green tiles will compete to give me my top 3 books of the year. And then from those 3, I will pick the winner, which will go on this large yellow piece. And on that, I will put a picture of the book cover. I will maybe write a little journal entry on why it was my favorite of the year. And below that, I'm adding another book embellishment from the Books and Coffee die set. I'm also going to add a couple more butterflies. I wanted to use up everything that I created for this journal, and I knew that there was going to be only one more spread after this one, I think. So I'm going to add the months to the left side of the yellow tiles. I am going in order from January to December, but I know some people like to mix up the months, so they might compete January with July, February with April, just to kind of change it up, because some people may rate books higher in the fall time based on like the new releases that come out. I personally am someone that reads books based on the season. So like I will read a lot more horror books in October. I'll read a lot more fantasy books during the winter months. So I think that's why people sometimes compete different months together versus going in order. But for this year, I'm going to go in order. Here I'm taking a fine liner and creating the lines for my bracket. And you can see, as I mentioned, I did get more confident as I continued in this journal, creating lines and actually writing in the book. All right, I have some more embellishments that I'm going to add to finish this up. And my final spread will be my 25 books of 2025. I was only able to fit 24 books on this spread, so I changed it to my 2025 TBR, which I think is fine. But I did, with my selfie Canon printer, cut out all the book covers of all the books I'd like to read in 2025. I don't know if I left enough room to add a check mark to determine if I actually read any of these books, but I'll know which ones I read, so I don't think it's a big deal. But I probably won't hit every single one of these books because I know there are some new 2025 releases that I don't think I put into this list. But I do think this will be a nice spread to look back on at the end of the year, and even in a few years from now, because I'm sure my reading taste will change throughout the years, so it'll be interesting to see what books I was interested in 2025. To embellish this spread, I have my stack of books in the bottom right corner, and I have all of these stemmed florals that I'm going to tuck throughout. And it's quite busy, but I kind of like how it ended up looking. And I think I lied. I will have another spread after this one. But here you can see I'm rearranging my flowers, trying to find the placement that I like. I did leave a space on the top left corner for Onyx Storm, which was a book title that I hadn't printed for some reason. I think it's because I ended up using that for the Books Read spread, but I ended up finding a book cover that I forgot to glue down anyway, so I just glued that one in place of Onyx Storm, and that's how I only ended up with 24 books versus 25. But I think this is the perfect size for the book covers. I believe they're 1 inch by 1.5 inches. And based on this TBR, you can probably figure out which books I'm interested in, and you can give me your suggestions. I definitely enjoy reading fantasy and romance, but I also really enjoy thrillers. Those are kind of the books I'll read in between like a big fantasy series. I also want to tackle the Throne of Glass series this year, probably during the fall time. So again, all of my book covers have double-sided tape behind them, so I'm going to go ahead and just glue them all down now. So I just sped up the video. And I think there is room to add a check mark below the titles, so I might do that as I read these. A lot of these books I already own, which is nice. So hopefully this spread I can look back on and be more motivated to read what I already have. I also got a Kindle for my birthday, so a couple of these are on Kindle Unlimited. All right. Here's that last book title that I found. So I'll just go ahead and tape that down. I have a craft label that I'll put up there, and then I cut the numbers 2025. And then over that, I'm going to add TBR with my gold letters. And I like how that ended up looking. So here I'm going through my little bucket of letters to find TBR. And that finishes off this spread. I love the book covers. And I was excited I was able to use my Canon selfie printer because I don't use it that often. But I will say the paper and the ink is pretty expensive. So it might be more beneficial to print on regular paper with a regular printer. But I do like the glossy photo paper. So this is my series tracker. I am more of a standalone book reader, but I really wanted to use this stack of books that I prepped. So I knew I needed one more spread. So I went for the series tracker, and these are the series that I'm trying to conquer. Not necessarily this year, but, you know, as of right now. So I went with Throne of Glass, Caraval, Empyrean, which is Fourth Wing, Crowns of Neaxia, which is Serpent in the Wings of Night, The Shepherd King, which is a duology, The One Dark Window, and then Magnolia Parks. I've heard great things about. So I added those. Some of these I've already started, so I can fill them out. I'm not sure why I glued that butterfly so low down. So here you can see I wanted to move it up, but it was too late. And then on the left side, I'm going to add this smaller stack of books, which I cut off that longer stack of books that I'm going to use on the right side. I have some more butterflies that I'll use and kind of scatter. Butterflies are great little embellishments if you don't know what to use or if you want to fill a space. I'm taking my ruler, and I'll be honest, guys, I was running out of time. I wanted to finish this last spread so I can start editing this video. So I kind of messed up my graphs here. I really only messed up this first one. But basically I'm creating a graph based on the number of books in the series. So Throne of Glass has 8 books. So here I'm doing math. I'm doing first grade level math and still can't figure it out. But I know I needed 3 lines to create 8 books, and I still messed it up, but it's fine. And then I'll go ahead and just add the numbers into the boxes. And then as I read the series, I can color in the boxes. Caraval has 4, or no, it's a trilogy, so there's 3. At first I was like counting the individual grids, but I end up just freehanding it because I'm getting it wrong anyway. Empyrean is set to have 5 books, so Crowns of Neaxia, I think, has 6. Shepherd King is a duology. Again, I think out of all the spreads I made, this is the one I'm least likely to fill out because I do tend to gravitate more towards standalone books. Also, a lot of these books are not even complete, like the Empyrean, and I think the Crowns of Neaxia is not finished by the author yet. But here I'm going to color in the first 2 slots of the Fourth Wing series, and then the first one for Crowns of Neaxia. All right, and then this stack of books is going to go on the right, and this will be my reading tracker. And I plan to cut the right side of this stack of books. So it'll be kind of like a Dutch door, but not really. You'll see a little bit onto the next spread. I'm going to add this little coffee cup to the top. And then I'll take my scissors and just trim off the right side. And then I will be filling out my book reviews for the remaining pages of this journal. And then I might come at the end of the year and do like a yearly wrap up that shows my stats and any final thoughts that I want to add. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. I know there's some movies that are shorter than this video, but I wanted to leave in the mistakes because this is something I've never done before. And several times I almost backed out of finishing it, but I'm glad I persevered because I love how this project turned out. And I can't wait to add my book reviews into the journal. And the reason I started a reading journal is because I actually forget very quickly which books I read and what my thoughts on the book. So unless I write my thoughts right after I finish reading the book, I will forget it like within a week. Even 5-star books I forget. I don't know why, but that's why I've always written reviews on Goodreads and also on my digital journal, so that if I ever want to reread it, I'll know my exact thoughts in that moment. All right, so here I'm creating my grid for my reading tracker. So at the bottom, I'll have every month of the year. And then on the left side, I'll have the numbers 1 through 31. And I have been tracking every single day that I read on my phone, so I can fill out a box based on each day that I've read in the month. So I really like tracking this. It's kind of satisfying again to fill out the boxes. It'll also be interesting to see my reading trends, because I definitely feel like I read more during the fall and winter, even though I'm busier with work during those months, but I just tend to, I don't know why, I tend to want to read more during those seasons. It'll also be interesting to see when I'm reading, because my job fluctuates on how busy I am depending on where I am in the collection process, so I can definitely see trends on when I tend to read more versus less. All right, so I can go ahead and fill out January and February, and I'm using Tombow markers for this. They work well with the fine liners that I use. So you can see I read like one whole week right there, a good chunk, and then I stopped reading. So January I read almost every single day. And also for February. March I was busier because I released the cat and dog collection. I also like on my reading log that I have when I start a book and when I finish a book, so I can see on average how long it takes me to read. I tend to be a slow reader. Unless the book is really good, then I can read a book in one sitting. I'm going to fill the top with some more embellishments, and that will finish off my reading journal setup. I am going to do a final flip through. So I'll go ahead and close up the journal. I love that I took inspiration from the journal itself with the mustard yellow color, and definitely going with more springtime images. All right, so here is my book belongs to page. My title. Again, if you want to see the paper piecing for any of the big images I used, definitely go back on my channel and go to spring of last year. That is when I brought out this book collection. Here's my little envelope full of books that I can use to fill out my bookshelf down there based on genre. Love that layout. It's definitely my favorite. My new release spread. My ratings in butterflies. This will be so awesome when it's fully colored. My books read log. A continuation for that. My reading log, my purchase log. My challenge spreads. So here I'm pointing out the markers that I completed. I just added a little flower to those. My book bracket. And then here I plan to put the winner, the book cover up there. My 2025 TBR. And finally, my series tracker and my reading tracker. So thank you so much for watching my video. If you're new to my channel, please feel free to subscribe. And again, thank you to everyone who's watching this video that's not used to this kind of content. I hope you still enjoyed it, and if you want to see more like this, just let me know. I could definitely do more scrapbooky style videos as well. So I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!